We have a fair number of hearings, public hearings to conduct this evening. We will get to them in just a moment. First, however, we have one housekeeping item of business to take care of, namely the action on the minutes of our January 30th meeting. Those minutes have been distributed to the commission members in advance. Is there a motion on the minutes that have been distributed? Second? Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Our January 30th minutes are approved. As we move into the public hearing portion of our meeting, just a note to those who are unfamiliar with our process. Each individual application will be announced by a member of the staff. We ask that a representative of the applicant or the applicant themselves come to the podium, provide their name and address for the record, and then a brief summary of the application involved. Following questions or points of clarification from the commission members, we will ask members of the public who wish to speak in favor of the application to do so, and then similarly an opportunity for those members of the public who wish to speak in opposition to the application to come forward and do so. As people are speaking either for or against, we ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes in duration to accommodate everyone and to keep the evening proceedings to an unlate hour. So with that, we are ready to begin our first public hearing.
Good evening, Commission members. The first public hearing is AS 2211A, a sign waiver appeal to install a roof sign on property situated at 500 Erie Boulevard East. Smith Building LLC is the property owner. Matthew Paulus is the applicant. And the property lies within a central business district, office and service district, restricted zoning district. The Commission has held 2 public hearings so far on January 9th and January 30th. Tonight is a continuation of that public hearing, and the applicant is appealing a decision by the zoning administrator denying a sign waiver to install a roof sign for a tenant use on the subject property. The scope of work includes installing 2 12-foot by 24-foot sign panels on the roof of a 6-story building for a ground floor tenant, and the proposal deviates from the sign regulations in that the tenant use is allowed 1 sign not to exceed 30 square feet or located above the first floor.
Okay, thank you. The applicant is here, and if you could kind of recap, including any changes since our last meeting here in January, please.
Thank you. And thank you again for the time to be here this evening and consider this request. I know we've talked about this a couple of times, but the Smith Building itself is a historic preservation brownfield, New York State brownfield project that provides affordable housing for the local Syracuse community. We had politely requested a review of the decision in regards to the practical difficulties of fulfilling our obligations around that project, those being historic and also those being economic at this time. We appreciate the Commission's time to consider this request and be happy to provide any additional information that's needed. Thank you.
Could I please ask that you introduce yourself and your address for the record?
I apologize, yes. My name is Matthew Paulus. I am the founder and president of Paulus Development. The business address is located at 225 Wilkinson Street, Syracuse, New York, 13204.
Okay, thank you for all that information. Are there any questions from the Commission members regarding the appeal that's before us?
No, thank you.
No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application, the appeal? Please come forward to the microphone, provide your name and address and your comments. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application before us? If so, please come forward. Okay, I don't see anyone rising to speak. Heard the update from the applicant. I think we are in a position to close this public hearing, and we'll do so now and entertain a motion from the commission for action on the appeal.
I would make the motion, but I do want to ask staff a question.
Please go ahead with the question first.
Because we're talking about granting an appeal, any issue about the declaration as far as negative declarations, do we need that for this? We still do. Okay, thank you. Move approval to grant the appeal with a negative declaration citing, we've had 2 public hearings before tonight. We've recognized the fact that the building itself is on the historic registry now, that the Department of Interior and all those other requirements have been discussed by various boards, and for 2 reasons, that this could be considered a pre-existing condition before this owner took over the business, and it's a non-conforming installation, but it's also a pre-existing condition. So I move to grant with a negative declaration.
Second.
Discussion on the motion before us. If there is no discussion, then all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? I believe the appeal has been granted.
Can I ask who voted against?
Rebecca and Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You have to... Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on then to our, thank you very much. Moving on to our next public hearing, please.
The next public hearing is PS 2202, a protected site designation to designate the exterior of property situated at 300 Waverly Avenue rear as a protected site. Upsilon Alpha chapter of Chi Omega is the owner and the applicant, and the property lies within a planned institutional district.
Good evening. My name is Kate Atwater. I'm the preservation planner for the city, and I'm here on behalf of the Landmark Preservation Board, which is petitioning the Planning Commission to designate as a local protected site the Upsilon Alpha Chapter House located at 300 Waverly Ave. Upsilon Alpha alumni of Syracuse is the owner of the property and initiated the application for local designation. The Landmark Preservation Board held a public hearing on October 6th of 22 regarding the nomination, and several people spoke in favor of the nomination and none spoke against. After careful review of the information, the board determined that the building meets 2 out of the 5 criteria for designation, and those include criterion 2, that is that the building is illustrative of the historic growth and development of the city, and criterion 3, that it embodies distinctive characteristics of type, period, and method of construction. In its resolution, the board noted that the Upsilon Alpha Chapter House is significant for its association with early mid-20th century collegiate life at Syracuse University and is home of the Upsilon Alpha Chapter of the Chi Omega National Women's Fraternity. At a time when women were not allowed to participate fully in campus social life, early women's fraternities offered secure housing and camaraderie for female students, as well as opportunities for leadership development through a variety of social, civic, and philanthropic endeavors on and off the Syracuse University campus. The Upsilon Alpha chapter includes in its membership women who have gone on to successful and illustrious careers. A couple members of note include Barbara Hale, who in 1960 was among the first women to receive a degree in physics from Syracuse University, and Laura Hand, who is an award-winning local journalist. The original structure was constructed in 1910 as a duplex at the northern end of the Walnut Park neighborhood. Upsilon Alpha purchased the house in 1919 and expanded it significantly in 1941. The chapter house features distinctive features of the colonial revival style architecture, including the monumental central portico, a wide cornice that wraps the entire building, and details such as the large fanlight that is over the central entrance. The Upsilon Alpha chapter disbanded in 1992, however, retained ownership of the property It is currently leased to the Pi chapter of the Pi Sigma Sigma sorority, which has occupied the building since 2001. The owners have been excellent stewards of this historic property, and in 2021 successfully nominated the property to the National Register of Historic Places. It is the Landmark Preservation Board's opinion that the property retains a high degree of integrity of location, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. The board was unanimous in its recommendation that it be designated a local protected site. And thank you for your consideration. If you have any questions for me.
Point of clarification, you mentioned the 5 criteria involved in designation, and is it the case that a site only needs to meet a single criterion
That's
among those
correct.
5 to...
Just one of the 5.
Okay.
Yes.
And this happens to be
And
2.
That's correct.
Thanks for the clarification. Questions for the applicant?
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please come forward. Write your name, address, and 2 minutes worth of comments, please.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. Good evening. My name is Kristen Olson. I'm an architectural historian with environmental design and research here in Syracuse. The business address is 217 Montgomery Street, Suite 1100. We're the consultant that assisted with the National Register nomination. So I'm speaking in support of local protected site designation for the Upsilon Alpha Chapter House, a privately owned building at the edge of the Syracuse University campus. Begun in 1910 as a duplex residence, it was purchased by the Upsilon Alpha Chapter of the National Chi Omega Fraternity in 1919 for their use, and later remodeled and expanded in 1940 to its current configuration. Although the house was closed by the national organization in the 1990s, it continues to be owned and cared for by the Upsilon Alpha Alumni of Syracuse, an active alumni organization with members belonging to Syracuse graduating classes from the 1940s through the 1990s. The Alumni Board has been very attentive to the maintenance and needs of the building, replacing the entire roof in 2020 and a damaged porch column in 2022. Wishing to formally recognize and preserve the building's historic significance, the group worked to have the house listed in the New York State and National Registers of Historic Places in 2021. The building was listed for its significance in the area of social history, for its association with early to mid-20th century collegiate life, and as the home of the Upsilon Alpha chapter of the Chi Omega National Women's Fraternity. It was also listed for its architectural significance as a distinctive intact example of early 20th century fraternity house typology. Several of the Upsilon Alpha alumni have provided letters in support of local protected site designation, which would further protect the chapter house, which is the last privately owned building on its block, which was once part of Walnut Park. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other individuals who might wish to speak in favor of this application, please come forward. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Please come to the podium. There don't seem to be any additional speakers, so we will close this public hearing and entertain a motion for action on this item.
I would move approval. Do I need a seeker determination? I would move approval with a negative declaration.
Discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The protected site designation is approved. Our next hearing, please.
The next public hearing is SP 2215, a special permit for indoor amusement and recreation in order to establish a fitness center on property situated at 919 East Genesee Street. BVK Syracuse Property Owner LLC is the owner. Ron Koretz is the applicant, and the property lies within a business Class A zoning district.
Good evening.
Good evening. I am William Walton with Walton Architecture Group. Address is 499 South Warren Street, zip code 13202, and that's the address of my business. I'm here representing the client who is putting in a training center in the Theory Building, which is bounded on the streets of Genesee, South Crouse, and Fayette Street. It's a student housing facility. This tenant is occupying a lease space on the first floor that's bounded by Fayette Street and Crouse. The space is about 2,500 square feet. My understanding is we've submitted this as a business occupancy, but there is a restaurant in the building which requires a special permit. My understanding is we're seeking a variance for parking and for signage. We did have our sign guy was supposed to be here with his sign rendition. I don't know if you've seen the sign renditions on the architectural drawings, but I do have them with me if you'd like to see them. The variance that we're seeking on the sign is, this is a corner site, so we are seeking a small sign on each facing street, South Crouse and Fayette Street, because it is a corner business. And then the parking is because we're limited to the parking that's available on site by the landlord, which I think was 4 spaces, and the rest is street parking and or adjacent parking lots. The building leasee is here, so if there's any questions about his operation, he can answer any of those, and if you'd like to see the elevations for the exterior, I can show you those.
I'm good.
The elevations? No? Okay, I guess we're all set with the elevations. Are there any questions for the applicants? Okay. Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please come forward, provide your name and address and your comments.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Mankiewicz, and tonight I'm representing the East Genesee Regent Association, 1100 East Genesee Street in the city. And as you know, this particular project is going to be located within the East Genesee Business District, and this is exactly the type of use that we want to see, where there's an active use on the ground floor of the building, because these kinds of active uses is what makes this district an attractive place to be able to build and support more residential use. So we'd very much like to see you approve this application, and we hope this will be an example to others about what we want to see in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Other individuals who wish to speak in favor of this application, please come forward. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Please come to the podium. I see no additional people rising to speak. I think we're in a position where we can close this public hearing and entertain a motion for action on this application.
Motion to approve granting the signage waiver along with the parking waiver and the negative declaration.
Second.
Thank you both. Discussion on the motion? And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The special permit SP-22-15 is approved. And we move to our next public hearing. Thank you both.
The next 2 public hearings are companion applications, starting with a re-subdivision, R2263, to divide one property situated at 1030 to 1060 East Genesee Street into 2 new lots. It is a companion application to a project site review for demolition and new construction in order to construct a 5-story apartment building, all on property situated at 1030 to 1060 East Genesee Street. Scholar Syracuse LLC is the owner and the applicant, and the property lies within an office Class B zoning district.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Marsh. I'm a partner with Hancock Esterbrook. The business address is 100 Madison Street, Syracuse, New York, 13202. And I'm here with Dean Newens, who's the president of the design portion of the Opus Group, and also Ashlyn Maurer from Barton and Judas. And you may remember that we were here before you towards the end of 2021 for project on this property. After we obtained the approvals, the project site review, as well as the variances and the re-subdivision, when the geotech work started, unfortunately, the very high groundwater in the area made the original design impracticable. So that was found out in early 2022. Dean and his group went back to the drawing board to develop a project that would work on this property, and we've been engaged with the city on the new design since about June of 2022, and we're very excited to talk to the Planning Commission about this project now. It remains 145 dwelling units. If you recall, it was going to be a 7-story. It's now 5 stories. Similar number of dwelling units. Similar parking, where you have the 2 levels of parking, one for the hotel use and the other level for the dwelling units. The main difference in this one is there is going to be demolition of the Scholar Hotel, which used to be called the Genesee Grand, and the Mayflower is going to be maintained on its own lot and stand in its own right. And the building has now been reconstructed to work on the lot using the area where the demolition is of the hotel. Happy to say that we don't need any variances with this project. It is just the project site review, and the waiver that is required is similar to the last one, which was the parking waiver. From 145 spots, we're proposing 131. And with that, I can turn you over to Dean to talk through more of the details, unless you'd like any more discussion on kind of how we got here and some of the background history.
We lost 2 stories, so I'm just curious. You said the residence is a similar number?
Yes.
You have a hard number?
Yes, and the reason being, the prior project was just going to be on the parking lot behind the hotel, the 2-story Genesee Grand, and now that's going to be demolished in part of the project. So Dean will be able to walk through how we were able to accomplish having the dwelling units with the new footprint.
Okay. So my question is just how many dwelling units? That's my exact.
It's 145 dwelling units. Good.
Just as a point of clarification, the proposal does necessitate a waiver of density for one of the proposed lots that's maintaining the Mayflower Hotel to be known as, I forget what it's going to be called, but they are maintaining one hotel on a proposed lot that the proposed lot necessitates a waiver from the density requirements.
Did the applicant know that already, or no?
Yeah. Yes, I misspoke. My apologies.
All right, thank you.
Let me give it to the detail person.
All right.
That's me? Yes. Oh, goodness. We're in big trouble. All right. Good evening. Dean Newens. My business address is 10350 Friend Road West, Minnetonka, Minnesota. As Ms. Marsh mentioned, we've been working on this for quite a while. We were in front of all of you at the end of 21 and appreciate the dialogue and the challenge you gave us to create the project that we did. The project that we tried to conceive, or we did conceive, was very compact, and in that created a lot of verticality, and it required us to go down 3 levels and then go up 7 levels. And so while that was an appropriate solution, the challenges with the subsurface conditions required us to rethink the project. But we believed in the project, and we wanted to figure out how we could work to maintain the best parts of this site, but also create this project that we're going to share with you tonight. Essentially, the Mayflower, it's a 100-year-old building. It's a beautiful building, and how can we create a project that complements that? You know, over in the 1950s, the Treadway Motel was built on that site, and over the years had been, let's say, had some facelifts to it. A porte-cochere was attached to the Mayflower, which created some complexity with the site. And what we did was really work with the landowners to say, well, what's the best and highest use of this property? And so we wanted to create a project that met the density that we talked about previously. And so we created two lots. One is for the Mayflower, and as Jeff mentioned, we do need a waiver for density, or FAR, but what we did is we created a lot split that actually met the zoning requirement of 40% coverage, so we don't need a waiver there. And I should add that we've reduced the amount of ask that we have coming back to the site, this project. We have the ability now, because we have a little bit more land to work with, we have the ability to meet more of the zoning requirements. So our two asks are the FAR density for the Mayflower, and then the 90% on the parking, which you've already approved on the previous project. So then, what's the process? Well, I would say that what we heard from you last time is let's make sure it's an appropriate project for its context, and that was working with Landmark Preservation Board. And so we started there. We actually, once we worked with staff and identified our approach, we immediately met with Landmark Preservation and met with them 3 times. The first time was to introduce the project and say, are we going in the right direction? Does this feel good to you? And then 2 additional times to refine the project, to get feedback from that board and to enhance the project architecturally. And at the end of that effort, we believe Landmark has approved and agrees with our project solution. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that things we heard from you all were incorporated into the project. And Commissioner Capella-Peters, you had one thing I remember when we met, we talked about the massing and the step down between the Grace Church and our building. Well, we reintroduced that into the project. So everything we heard, we actually introduced back into the project, but then took it further. As an example, on Madison, we had a 20-foot setback. We've now increased that to 26 feet, so further opening the view corridor to Grace Church. The other thing that we were able to do was actually work on Genesee Street. So Genesee Street had, the current Genesee Grand sits on the property line, and its terrace, while it was approved by variance, actually encroaches into the right-of-way of the project. The current zoning asks for a 20-foot setback along Genesee, so we've honored that with our design solution. And then I would say that the other area where we really wanted to focus is who are our neighbors? Well, Grace Church is our neighbor. So one of the first things we did, besides meeting with Landmark, was to actually go meet with Grace Church, share the project, and talk about how we could work together. And in that, we created some, let's say, some enhancements and betterments for the church because of that relationship. One thing that doesn't work very well on Grace Church is the relationship of the parking lot to the garden that is adjacent to the structure. We are now creating connectivity, an accessible path from the accessible parking into the park, into the garden, as well as access to the kitchen. So we're going to improve that relationship. Also, for those of you that are familiar with the site, the actual trash for the hotel sits right next to the church and is kind of an eyesore, and behind that, not very well maintained. So we've taken all the trash and we've internalized it into the project. So we have trash rooms for the hotel, the Mayflower Hotel, which will be maintained at 82 rooms, and it has its own trash room inside their garage. And then we've actually have the same trash room for our proposed project within this car court that's created in the center of the project. And so, and then I would say that the last thing, jumping back to Grace Church, the other thing that we were able to do is because we've now taken the trash away, we've able to beautify the garden at the back half. Right now it's kind of, it's almost a place where people go and do things they're not supposed to do. Let me just say it that way. And so we're able to beautify that and enhance the relationship between these two projects. So we believe we've helped Grace Church with their environment while introducing our project. The couple of the things that I'll mention, so we talked about the building being lower, so we've taken the density that we proposed and we've stretched it out across the site. We've increased the setback along Madison. We've fully enclosed the parking now. So previously in our previous scheme, we had a combination of structured parking inside this 3-story subterranean basement, but then it was still quite a bit of parking that was outside open to the sky. So now in this scheme, we're able to have all of our parking indoors for both projects, which in this climate is a betterment as well. So we're pleased with that. The other thing is that we were able to do by pulling this porte-cochere or breezeway away from the Madison, we improved life safety for the Madison itself. With working with fire, they like the idea that we're able to now drive apparatus into the site, and we've created a hammerhead solution that meets code that allows the fire department to access all aspects of the building within this carport that we've created. And then lastly, just along Genesee, just maintaining the best parts of that. If you're familiar with along the street, the connective corridor is part of the holistic approach there. And so by pulling the building back at a minimum of 20 feet off the property line, maintaining existing light poles that are there, there's I think 9 of them that run the entire block, and so we're keeping those on site and then actually creating a landscape zone between our building and the curb. So looking for ways to make the project better, but still meet the program that you all had seen before and approved. So with that, I'll just stop here and answer any questions that you have, and we have our civil engineer here as well if you have any questions for her. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Questions for the applicant?
Yes. The city transportation planner had a series of questions, and I see that your response, which was dated February 3rd, and then his comments are February 9th, where he says the revised plans do not address. Is that, did we just cross in the mail by a couple? Because as I read your response, it looks as though your response to his second concern regarding the new access lane, the fire access lane, that appears to be going a long way towards his response. Did Neil see those? Or yes, no? Someone? Anyone?
My understanding is that there's still an issue about encroaching into the right-of-way with the fire lane, but that a meeting has been convened this week.
Okay.
And so should the commission elect to move this forward this evening, I would just ask that it be conditioned upon resolution of that issue.
Okay. Thank you.
If I could add a little bit of color there, we worked closely to respond to the comments from prior to February 3rd, and then also on February 3rd, the request from transportation was that move this fire lane to the extent possible, and look at ways to bury the power. We did an analysis through our engineering group and determined that it was not feasible and established a narrative to that effect. And then additionally, life safety is important, right? So this is first and foremost. So we took our building and we pushed it as far back on the site as possible, adjusted our architecture while maintaining the aesthetic that Landmark, we had agreed to with Landmark, and then did what was asked of us. And then transportation came back with that 2.9 comment, which now there's a bit of a disconnect there in that we did what we were asked, and that group, transportation group, is still doesn't like it, right? But we have to satisfy fire as well. The interesting thing about this, in the last comment in our bullets and our response, was that because of the distance between the curb and the property line, and then the distance between the property line and our building as required to move the fire lane into the site, actually creates a distance greater than fire wants. They want 15 to 30 feet from an access point to a building. It's 48 feet. So we're meeting the zoning, we're meeting the requirement to move this fire lane off the right-of-way as far as possible, and there's some things that are just overlapping. So, what the strategy that we took was like, well, how can we make this, understanding that the fire lane is important to us, and important to the life safety of the project, how can we beautify it as much as possible? Our basis of design was down the street, as you know, there's this wide sidewalk that just sits right on the curb pretty much and incorporates a sidewalk into the fire lane. And working with the comments from transportation, it was to separate the two. So we've created a sidewalk as requested. We've created a landscape buffer that separates the fire lane. We've created control gates which eliminates the ability for cars to accidentally drive onto the site, so it becomes a fire use only, and looking for ways to beautify it. I wasn't aware that there's another meeting this week, but the reality is we've done everything we've asked, and what we would ask of this commission was to approve us so we can go back and fine-tune with staff this, rather than holding us up and continue to make this the aspect that keeps what is really a very well thought out project from moving forward, if I may.
Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant?
All set, thank you.
I think we're all set for the moment.
Thank you.
Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please come forward, provide your name and address and comments. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application? If so, please come forward.
Good evening, Dave Mankiewicz, 1100 East Genesee Street. I'm speaking on behalf of the East Genesee Region Association. First of all, East Genesee welcomes Opus Group to Syracuse and appreciates their investment in the district. They have no objection to the proposed development of student housing nor to the amended plan to demolish the building. However, as EGRA has stated to this body in similar developments, it has two modifications to the plan that it would like to see. First of all, parking. The existing zoning ordinance, as properly described, requires 1 space per unit for the hotel structure and 1 space for each unit of residential unit in the building. They are 14, as by the count, short of that requirement. And of course, the concern here always is we need to support the district's cultural uses such as Syracuse Stage, the Community Folk Arts Center, the restaurants. These are all nighttime uses. And what really would be is a problem for us is allowing residential development and users to compete for the parking for those nighttime spaces. Now, as the commission realizes, the unit count does not match the beds. There's 386 beds, so you always run the risk with student housing that you may have more vehicles than you anticipate per unit. We do not think it's onerous to ask the developer to meet this requirement, as there are 2 parking garages within a 1-block walk of the proposed development. They don't have to build or acquire another space, they just have to lease existing ones. The active uses on the ground floor is always the second one. The fact that the developer plans to demolish one of the most active uses in the district, the restaurant and the bar associated with the Collegian and the Genesee Grand, and not incorporate any new active retail, restaurant, or service in its place. As you've just seen with the previous applicant, other student housing developers are able to attract active uses to their ground floors, and these businesses are the types that a mixed-use district needs to create a thriving and interesting environment for the residents, the visitors, and the students, the very market the developer is trying to attract to the building. So now, while we realize the rezone ordinance is not in place, hasn't been approved yet, this site will be designated as an MX4 district, in which active uses will be required in the development of this size in this location. And that ordinance, as it in this draft now, says all residential developments exceeding 30,000 square feet of gross floor area shall include at least 1 first-floor commercial use, and that the incorporation of retail shops or restaurants is encouraged at the street level to promote a more active environment for pedestrians and to support residential and office uses that are located in the same building or nearby. What the developer has proposed to do is remove the active use and replace it with a lobby and 5 ground floor apartments on the East Genesee Street frontage. And while it might cost them a couple of ground floor apartments, I'm sure there's some retail, restaurant, or service use that would be appreciated by 386 students and at least 82 hotel guests. EGRA's disappointment in the current first floor design is heightened by the fact that the Opus Group is an excellent developer who knows how to incorporate mixed uses into multifamily and student projects. They do it extremely well. And if you just do a quick review of the student housing projects on their website, I'll give you some examples. In Ames, Iowa.
10 seconds.
Thank you.
Yep.
Opus leveraged its considerable student housing experience with a new mixed-use project that includes private student housing and retail space. I could go down the list. They're going to cut me off. Ames, Richmond, Virginia, Marquette University in Milwaukee, and in Minneapolis, and all the projects, their student housing projects, are smaller than what they're proposing here. and they were, in every single one of them, talking about how important it was for them to incorporate ground floor space.
Time.
So we just want you to let you know, we'd like the Planning Commission. This is not, we don't think this is their best work, and we'd like you to insist that they improve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the application? If so, please come forward. I don't see any additional speakers. I think I neglected to say at the outset of our public hearing process, where there are comments made in opposition, we extend to the applicant an opportunity to address comments made in opposition. So my apology for the omission at the front end of this public hearing process, but you do have an opportunity if you wish to address them.
For that opportunity, I appreciate that. We fully respect that the comments that Davis made this evening, and I'll just add 2 points to that comment. This came up in Landmark Preservation Board, and we talked about the idea of how do we activate this, because retail while there is currently a restaurant there, retail in its general term does not work well there for a couple reasons. One is it's 20 feet back from the street. There's a grade change at this location that puts this floor 5 or 6 feet above the sidewalk. So that becomes very difficult. So how do we overcome that? And working with Landmark, what we agreed to is, rather than, it's more than a lobby, what we've done is put our activated spaces on the corner of the building at the entrance. We introduced a terrace on the outside, so it becomes an indoor-outdoor space that really starts to feel like it is now, which now the restaurant has a terrace there. And Landmark got comfortable with that. They felt that. I completely appreciate that the group doesn't feel like that retail is a better use here, but in this block, there's no other retail that co-tenancy that retail likes. So we look for ways to address that comment, and that with the physical condition of grade, we felt like we had addressed the concern. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Do the commission members need any additional information or? The consensus of the commission?
I think the last comments notwithstanding, every one of these student housing projects that we look at in this neighborhood, we comment on inactive first floor spaces. And I appreciate the change in grade. I guess, unfortunately, if you were to look just a few blocks to your east, the new student housing project there has a first floor retail space that's a coffee shop that seems to be fairly successful. The lights are always on, there's people always there, and they also have a substantial change in grade. As a matter of fact, I would probably argue maybe even more than what you have. So I've been pretty consistent with every one of these projects. That's an important component to me. It didn't come up the last time because you were facing on Madison, where we would not necessarily want that. It's much more residential in character. And with the project that we just approved across the street, I'm pretty sure it's right across the street, right? Just about. They went back and made a revision and included some retail space and shifted around some of their active uses for their tenants as well. So it would seem to me, and I agree with my colleague, that the meeting with the transportation planner might be an important one to have go forward, but I would also be interested in seeing if there's any way you could accommodate even a minor amount of active retail, in the broadest sense of the word, retail space, where the hotel and its outdoor eating area used to be. But that's just two of us.
So, because it now faces, I'm following along with the logic here, because we've now turned then you're facing Genesee Street, it does sort of change our thinking as a group. And I'm the deliberative one, so bear with me. And we want to commend you because you have, since you had to go through many steps to redevelop the project, considering the the space that you sit in and the groundwater issue, I think, is what we're talking about. For us, we always like to do a little homework. We would like a chance to have the meeting with the transportation planner done, just so that's one less condition we have to put into any resolution. So I think holding it to the next session is probably going to be productive.
You don't need another condition. The condition that you have in your resolution covers it. It's fine. You don't need anything additional.
Okay.
Because if I understand correctly, the question is the going into the right-of-way. So it's not, it's a legal issue as far as the approval to do that. So that's the meeting I assume you're talking about. It's kind of a legal issue for the permission to be able to have the fire lane in.
Right. The meeting I was referring to has nothing to do with the development in terms of the first floor. That is not an issue, but the issue that the meeting will discuss is the right-of-way. But again, if that's the issue, our recommendation would be to approve conditioned upon them satisfying that, which they are obligated to do anyway because they have to satisfy all other rules and regulations.
And if, I'm sorry, please.
Is the meeting just to secure approval for the encroachment in the right-of-way, or is it actually a redesign issue as well?
It's the right-of-way.
So the design that we're seeing has been approved by the transportation planner is saying he's satisfied, it's just a right-of-way issue?
Correct.
Okay, well, that's different.
If I could just also address the other concern with regard to parking, the idea that there would be a competition.
Use the mic, please.
Sorry. A competition for the parking on the street. I mean, as we all know, a lot of the students and a lot of the folks that are in these smaller apartments, they don't necessarily have cars. So when there is the request for the 0.9 to have less parking spaces, it doesn't necessarily conclude that there will be cars competing on the street. So I just wanted to at least respond to that comment.
So I'll respectfully, humbly say I disagree with that statement. We can't speculate what we think a student is going to have or not have a car. So that is a defining factor, especially with parking and the space being in the area that it is with high traffic, as far as someone mentioned regarding evening events. But I just want to clarify, please, let's not assume, because we can't put things on paper that we are not officially assured of. But thank you for your comment.
Just to stay on that, so parking is always a challenge, is figuring out what's the right amount of parking, and too much parking is also not good because it just uses up land mass. We all talked about this in the previous scheme. We got comfortable with those 14 cars. We thought that we were coming back and that wouldn't be a concern. We have introduced, and while you could say, well, if it's snowing out, you're not going to use a bicycle, we've created 2 very large bike storage facilities on the project. We've created drop-off zones in front of both the hotel and our project so that other forms of ride share can be used. We're looking at other ways for people to get around. The proximity to the university is a very walkable environment, so we do feel that if we were further away, cars would probably be more of a concern, but because of our proximity, we also feel that 10% is reasonable. So I hear what you're saying, but I think we've put some thought into that, and our ask is minimal. And because of all the other modes of transportation that are available, we think that we feel like we're okay there, because that's important to us. If we create a project that does not meet market, then bad on us, right? That causes a problem as well. So we want to make sure we do it right.
Gotcha. And then lastly, I just would kind of want you to just expound a little more on the, let's call it non-conforming use, I guess, with no commercial at the ground level. Have you really given that any real thought, considering the characteristics of that neighborhood?
We did. I spoke a little bit about that previously. We talked about that with Landmark, and just because where we are in this particular block, there's no other retail. The retail feeds on itself and supports itself when it's next to others. And we felt if we were to create a retail, let's just say it's a coffee shop again, and that's the right use, then it's a destination coffee shop. It doesn't work with, I'll just pick the flower shop next door or the bookshop next door. It's the only retail in the entire block. So we felt that how do we create something that has the appearance is not necessarily the right word, but has the appearance of activation, and not just the front door of our lobby, but actually spaces that people are using, our club room, our internal coffee shop, and the idea that there's an inside-outside space with this terrace that we've created. So we feel like we've created the activation that the intent of the code is looking for, without creating a retail environment because of the challenges with grade. Because think about it, if it's retail, then I have to get people up there, right? And so that accessible route, so we've got a 50-foot ramp that we have to build to get somebody up to that space. And it just didn't seem like that was going to be successful. So working with Landmark, how do we get it without creating a traditional retail experience?
So you're saying, just so I understand you correctly, so you're saying a retail space that's, if you want to say standalone, it wouldn't survive because it's alone by itself? Is that what you're saying?
That would be, that's our experience in this type of work, yes. That's our opinion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, please.
No, I was just going to ask if there are additional comments, but you might have a
No, I just wanted
comment
to
yourself.
ask. We've been working hard on this for, as Wendy mentioned, for 8 months now, and really worked hard to listen and to take the project that we all worked with together in 21 and apply it to this new strategy, and to bring everything we learned into this project, and ask that you consider our project tonight so that we can go back and work out the details with staff. And so if there are some conditions that you want to apply to your vote tonight, then that would help us move forward. It's just timing, and we want to continue to advance the project. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Just for a point of clarification, retail is permissible but not required in this district. That's my reading of the code as it stands today. So if that helps you at all in moving forward, I just wanted to share that. It is certainly a permissible use, but it is not required.
Then we had the other clarification previously regarding the points of concern from the transportation planner, and the assurance that if the commission wished to act this evening on this, it could condition its approval, if that's where it was headed, on the meeting to happen soon after this meeting, within the next week or so. So there's not necessarily a need to hold open for that item. The question becomes whether the commission wants to hold it open on the issue of first floor retail, however that's defined, activity, to ask the applicant to closer look at that, or whether there's enough information before us to act on the application as it exists tonight and as it's been updated and clarified through the discussion this evening. Any sense of...
Maybe there's a question. It's on the periphery here, but it might help with our discussion if I could ask the applicant.
Please.
I'm sorry if I didn't see this in the plan, but you mentioned an internal or interior or maybe just tenant use only coffee shop. Mm-hmm. Where would that be?
On that corner that we're talking about, that would have retail, that you're talking about a retail. So we're basically trying to to create the effect or look of an activated streetscape with our tenant use, but it's not open to the public. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm trying to get it to make sense. I'm a step behind you because you've been working on this for a while. So you're saying that there would be a community room that they use as a coffee shop? It's not a coffee shop, is what you're saying.
It is a community room is another way to say it. A club room. It is fully glazed, so it's open to the outside. It's open to the street. It has doors that open to the terrace on good weather days. So it becomes an activated street for the use of the tenants, for the residents. Again, this is what we talked about with Landmark, and they got comfortable with it.
I'm trying to, this is not mental gymnastics, it's not that difficult, but I'm just trying to meeting of the minds here with what you're saying. So that there's a common space that the tenants would use, and in good weather that they could actually step outside and sit on this terrace area.
Right.
But you're not going to have someone come in and run a coffee shop just for the tenants.
Oh, there may be a coffee shop run for the residents, absolutely. It could be part of that environment, but it would be, so if you think about the entire block, what we really try to do aesthetically is take this building and have it complement the Mayflower. You see the use of materials, and then this idea that at the ground floor there is an open glass area that you get to see what's happening inside. And that an activated streetscape, in its sense, is seeing people doing things, see and be seen, right? That's really the effect we're trying to create with the hardship that we have. Retail likes to be at the property line. We're 20 feet back plus. Retail likes to be at grade. We're 5 feet up in the air. And Commissioner Capella-Peters, your point is taken. They did create a way to get up there, right? It's a different kind of project. I mean, it's a much, it's a larger project and it has a larger presence on the street than we would have. Our project lobby is internalized, right? And this is, out in front. So it's a little bit different, but I've been by it many times, and I hear what you're saying. It's a really well-designed project. I think it's really well done.
Again, I think that what we've been struggling with as we've looked at all of these buildings, and to some degree the anticipation of a new zoning ordinance, is this bringing the community into, dare I say, the 20th century, not the 21st, but the idea to have truly mixed-use individual properties, but then mixed-use districts. And if the MX4, as you noted, would have this requirement to have some kind of public-private interaction on the first floor, and we're theoretically moments from having that approved, this will be a project that kind of gets on, would skirt that requirement.
Sure.
Days,
it's interesting
whatever.
because, at times when we wanted to look at MX4 and talk about the value of that, when we looked at even the previous project and the density, we were cautioned not to do that.
Exactly.
And here we are not doing it, and we're being influeed by it. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, this is the future, right?
And I've been someone who's been saying for however long we've been struggling with rezone that it's not anything yet, so we shouldn't think about it. But as we've looked at each of these projects, and heavens knows, there seems to be millions of them, the issue about an active first floor has been absolutely consistent. If one could look at our minutes, you can see that for every project that we viewed.
And
perhaps I'm in the minority. Nothing has to be unanimous up here, but that always will be a concern of mine. And as I said, the project across the street, we just had this. If you look down on our agenda, we're about to have this discussion for another project in just a few minutes. So it's not going away, and I think we've just been struggling with trying to be consistent.
And that's why we wanted to apply this strategy, this architectural strategy, is to create that effect and look and that energy. Let's talk about just energy, people energy, without this challenge of having retail be successful because of the zoning and the setback and the grade, but still get that see and be seen effect. So we're trying to do what the intent of the code is doing without actually putting in a store that has a person that runs a store and has to make a living.
Just as a point of clarification, rezone does not require retail on the first floor.
I was repeating what somebody said.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody.
You would think it's all burned into my head by now, how many times I've read it, but it
is unfortunately burned into my head.
Thank you, Dan.
But again, I think the idea that we've been talking about for years is this concept of an active first floor space adjacent to the public right-of-way. And topography has been something I've said we really haven't grappled with appropriately in rezone anyway, but there are creative ways to do it. I would agree with everything that Steve said. I think that overall, and what Mr. Mankiewicz said, overall it's a very reasonable project. I think it's in the right location, given some others that we've looked at. I'm just very concerned about that issue. And I appreciate the efforts you've gone to try to take your so-called private spaces and make them more public by where you've set them and what you've done with architectural design.
And we will continue to refine that. And we're hearing you. I think one thing you'll learn about working with us and staff is like, we're committed to doing the right thing and doing the right project. And so this will evolve into a very active and high energy space on the corner. And as I mentioned, the challenges we have with making retail, traditional merchant retail work, notwithstanding, we will make this a place where people walk by and go, oh, there's things going on in there. That's cool. That's the interest we're looking for. So with that, I think we talked about enough. Thank you.
Yes, we have. Thank you very much for your patience.
Yeah.
Further questions or discussion points with the applicant?
So, I don't have a question for him because he doesn't know the project or to agree to the media mesh.
Tech garden.
Right, the tech garden.
Just thinking about active windows and people being able to see in and see things going on. We commend you for that. Just saying, this is all welcome and applauded because we do at least want signs of life in all these buildings. But I can feel the...
We also have a hotel next door that has a lot of people coming and going, and a terrace out there as well. So there's things going on the entire block.
I wish Lisa Welch were here, because whenever we do something in this zoning district, the vision for the zoning district is a setback with greenery and landscaping separating the building from the sidewalk. And what we're talking about is trying to modify that zoning requirement that is baked into your law to create an active street front, right? And it's a very challenging thing to do. And I think that is kind of to Dean's point, that it's not just the topography, it's what the zoning code requires. It makes it more difficult to actually do. And to avoid, variances and having to go to two boards and everything. I mean, they've really worked hard to try to maintain the look of that building in the front and maintain the driveway that services it in the middle on a street that doesn't have any on-street parking. So, I mean, there's a lot of challenges to on-street retail at this site that would probably, if it were under rezone, it would have been forced to be closer to it would have been a zero lot line, at the property line at least, in part. There would have been a lot of differences in design that they would have probably taken on to meet that.
Dan, that's a really good point, is because the Mayflower is set back 20-something feet too, and so all of a sudden, if we were doing a zone that required us to push to the street, we'd be hiding the Mayflower. So within the block of University, along Genesee, our buildings talk to each other aesthetically, from materiality, and relationship from massing, and just the feel of it, the landscaping we're trying to create. So let us work to figure out how to make this a visually interesting space, but work with the zoning that's been established for us to work within. I think that's what we're trying to get at.
What I'd like to suggest is, we've been talking about both the re-subdivision and the project site review for this project. It makes sense to talk at once about both items since they're so intimately related to one another. At this stage, I think it makes sense now to separate these two, as we would eventually do anyways, the re-subdivision from the project site review. And so I'm going to suggest to my colleagues that we close the hearing for R-22-63, which is the re-subdivision application, entertain a motion on that, and then see where we go from there to the next one, and see if we make progress here tonight. So let's declare the hearing closed for the re-subdivision, R-22-63. And
if I can just interrupt, and I'm sorry, and I'll defer to Dan or Sue, but I would just offer as a cautionary note with closing the re-subdivision, not that I expect this to happen, but if you're going to keep the project site review open for revisions, it is possible, albeit improbable, that any revisions may end up altering or necessitate an alteration of the proposed re-subdivision. So I just ask that you keep that in mind as you go forward. I'm not saying it's inevitable, it's probably improbable, but it's a possibility.
And I guess we would respectfully request that they both be closed and a decision be made on both applications. So I think what Jeff is saying is, as opposed to closing one, kind of make a decision on the overall project, because I know we've spent a lot of time talking about the different options there, and I fear that we will spend another month and be back before you debating the same issues without necessarily a change to add in a retail space, especially since it wouldn't be required under the new code. So I would ask the commission if the board is willing to close the public hearing and make a decision on the pending application.
I don't think we have any outstanding requests for information on the project site review, if I read the comments and questions correctly. So in that case, I think we are at a point where we can close both public hearings. So we'll do that now. And
Sorry, I want to be sure, as you're saying, that no one has any request for any additional information. I'm looking down, there's no... Okay, then fair enough. So we're closing both.
And I respect the thought that if there's tough sledding with the project site review, it might ripple back and affect the re-subdivision. But and I think it makes sense to start with the subdivision rather than act upon the project site review. So with both hearings now closed, let's see if there's a motion on the re-subdivision application, because we do have to act separately on these. Right.
In terms of the re-subdivision, R22-63, move approval with a negative declaration.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. So R-22-63 is approved. That's the re-subdivision for the project we've been speaking about. Now we come to PR-22-24, which is the project site review for the very same project. Is there a motion for action on this?
Move approval with a negative declaration granting the waiver of off-street parking, 14 spaces, granting the waiver of the density requirement.
Second.
Discussion on this motion. Then those in favor of...
Before I'll in my own motion, I'll just mention that we are always willing to look at modifications. If anyone did intend to put a retail space or restaurant in, we would certainly welcome that conversation as we move forward here.
I agree, and there's been a lot of discussion, as pointed out earlier, not just on this particular project, but in this particular general neighborhood location of first floor retail activity. So if there were to be a proposed modification, I think it would be, and if the project were approved, well received. So thanks for the additional context for the motion. Further discussion on the motion? Then all those in favor of the project site review for PR-22-24, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? Looks like the project site review is approved. PR-22-24. Next.
Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate it. We'll work hard to...
Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, make this a beautiful project for the streetscape. I think you'll be impressed when we're finished. Appreciate it.
Our next public hearing, please.
The next public hearing is R23-03, a re-subdivision to combine two properties situated at 210 and 212 South Albert Street into one new lot. Dora E. Peterson and the Greater Syracuse Property Development Corporation are the owners and the applicants, and the properties lie within a residential Class A zoning district.
Good evening, I'm Terry Luckett I'm a neighborhood planner at the Greater Syracuse Land Bank, 431 East Fayette Street. The Land Bank demolished a two-family house at 210 South Albert in 2020. The lot has 70 feet of frontage. It's 134 feet deep, but it's steeply sloped, and that makes it an unlikely candidate for new construction. The adjacent homeowner at 212 South Albert doesn't have very much of a backyard. She'd like to purchase the lot for additional yard space. She'd like to think about in the future of getting herself a driveway, although she would need retaining walls. May not happen. We explored splitting that lot with the multifamily apartment building on the other side, but it's a non-conforming use. In an RA zone, it would require a use variance. So that's also, the only thing they would use it for probably is parking, and again, the slope makes it unlikely for parking. So the proposal offers the opportunity to put the parcel back into productive use. And in the future, it'll make it easier for the homeowner to apply for driveway or fence permits.
Was there ever a dwelling on this, or structure on the site?
Yeah, there was a two-family there.
Oh, despite the slope, okay. Questions for the applicant?
All set, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward. No additional speakers. We'll close the hearing for R-23-03, the re-subdivision. Is there a motion?
I would move approval with a negative declaration, noting that although this will end up being one of the largest properties on the street, therefore inconsistent with the pattern, that the severe topography is a mitigating factor for that.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Then all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? R-23-03 is approved on Lodi Street. Our next public hearing.
The next public hearing is R-23-06, a re-subdivision to divide one property situated at 310 West Kennedy Street into two new lots. The Greater Syracuse Property Development Corporation is the owner and the applicant, and the property lies within a residential Class AA zoning district.
Me again, Terry Luckett, Greater Syracuse Land Bank, 431 East Fayette Street. The vacant lot at 310 West Kennedy Street it has 108 feet of frontage by 193. Our strategy is to split it down the middle to create two new building sites. We're working with Onondaga County on a plan for a new construction of single-family homes there, and we'll sell the lots to the developer that the county ultimately selects. So we don't have site plans or anything yet, but that's the plan. So splitting the lot helps to reestablish a pattern where most of the lots on the street have between 40 and 60 feet of frontage.
Questions for the applicant? I just said before the meeting started, this is the first application I can recall where we went from one lot to two lots instead of the reverse, two lots to one lot. It's refreshing to see.
There might be some more with Mike Brown coming up and thinking about new construction, and hopefully
we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Construction going on.
Okay. No further questions for the applicant?
Nope.
Thank you, Terry. All those who wish to speak in favor of this application, please come forward. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application, please come forward. We have no additional speakers. We'll close the hearing for the West Kennedy Street re-subdivision R-23-06. Is there a motion for action?
Move approval with a negative declaration.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? R-23-06 is approved, taking us to our next public hearing.
The next public hearing is SP-23-03 for a special permit for self-storage facility on property situated at 861 Van Rensselaer Street. Storage Cap Syracuse LP is the owner. J. Ingracia is the applicant, and the property lies within a lakefront T5 zoning district.
Thank you, sir.
The applicant is ill and was unable to make it, so I'm representing him. My name is Randall Sickler. I'm with SWBR, located in Syracuse at 309 South Franklin Street, and zip code 13202. And I'm representing the architecture firm for the project. This is a 115,860 square foot self-storage facility, 2 stories with a 57,430 square foot footprint, located at 861 Van Rensselaer Street. Currently, there is nothing across the street from this building, nothing on the adjacent lot to the east. There is a building material supply store and a microbrewery just to the west of this. The proposed building is purely for self-storage. It has a small office which has 2 to 3 tenants. It has parking for the employees, leasers, and 2 unloading entrances on the east and south side of the building. I'm not sure what else other information you'd like to hear.
And I'm with the engineering firm, Costage Engineering, Evan Gaffel. That's at 217 Lake Ave, Rochester, New York, 14608. I kind of just wanted to touch base on the site plan. I'll stay in front of the mic. It's hard to do.
You can pull the microphone out. I mean,
swivel it.
Completely out, but disengage it.
So since we're in the lakefront district, some of the elements that we have added is the sidewalk throughout the frontage of the site, following some of the regulations with keeping the setback from the front, keeping the, the what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. Oh, the frontage build out is what I was looking for. So the building faces that front, and then having the wall on the eastern portion, as well as landscape to buffer the parking. There's also a bike rack, and then most of the vehicular use is in the rear of the site. And putting the building up front, I think, meets that requirement of trying to, start that the fabrics at that time.
Okay, are there questions for the applicant?
Yeah, so we're moved from the re-subdivision to the special permit, and there are waivers or exceptions. You mentioned the parking and some screening of the parking.
Is that changed since the information that we received? Has there
Yes,
been an
it
update
has.
with the staff?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we're proposing...
That first exception, item number 14
Yes.
on the agenda, is no longer necessary.
Okay, thank you. And there's something, the mention that the city arborist will approve the deviation from the species and from the caliper?
Yes, the proposed tree species and tree calipers are in keeping with recommendations from the city arborist.
So we still need a waiver, but it's in keeping with what the arborist will approve?
That would be the justification for the waiver.
Okay.
Or exception, I apologize.
I know my colleague wants to ask about the finishing materials.
Yeah, so you're proposing IFAS for the exterior, and as I understand from staff, the previous iteration of this, we allowed that as an exception. We approved it previously.
That is correct.
Also, there was a question I had about signage. Go ahead. I'm going to have to find what I'm looking for.
In the meantime, staff, what was our reasoning for approving that material before?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I would have to go back and look at the minutes or review. I don't know if that was noted in the resolution or not. I would have to go back and review.
Just because we treat every application separately to itself. So I'm just curious to know what was our reasoning before, because it may have been a reason that may not be justifiable for this one, but I'm just curious.
I don't know off the top of my head, except to say it would have been based on justification provided by the applicant.
Okay. All right. I think we probably have the same question.
Well, mine was going to be signage.
Oh, okay. No, so we don't.
Okay, you keep going then.
Oh, so just for clarification, considering the material, what's your reasoning for that material?
For the proposed synthetic stucco?
Correct.
It is the owner's standard, they are a franchise type operation, it is their standard exterior finish.
Okay. Go ahead.
Because I think we're all on the same page about the signage, so go ahead.
Might you be able to like give us any like proof of that's like typically the like all they would want to use? Like what's?
I'm sure we could produce photographs of and produce their standards to submit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So along the same lines, if I might, Walter?
Right.
Then I assume the signage is also a corporate sign package as well?
It is.
And then to staff, the 88, heavens, plus square feet, is it just the letters? I always get, how y'all calculate this is always intriguing to me.
Item 18 in your report, the exceptions, they revised the sign plan, and it deviates from the sign requirements in that there are two separate signs. The lakefront requires a single sign band on the facade of each building. So on the east, more precisely the southeast side of the building facing the access drive, there are two separate signs. So this deviation, they revised the plan to only include one sign facing Van Rensselaer, but there are two signs now facing the access drive that do not appear to be a single sign band.
You're referring to where it says loading, that one?
Yes. On the, I believe the elevation is labeled the east elevation.
Right.
There's a loading and I think there's an office.
Should be an office one as well.
And if you look at the elevations in your report, or in the sign plan, you'll see that there are two separate signs that are not in a single band.
Yeah, okay.
So in that respect, it deviates from the lakefront sign requirement.
In position, but not size?
Correct.
Okay.
Right, there's two separate canopies, each of them, one is a loading entrance, one is the office entrance, and they each have separate signage.
But from a zoning perspective, the two issues are all the signs would appear in the same plane, if you will. There'd be a sign van that would keep them all in one location. So you're deviating from that. I was also looking at size. Size is not an issue. So, okay. Thank you, both.
Further questions for the applicants?
All set, thank you.
Thank you. Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please come to the podium. Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward. Have additional speakers for this application. We'll declare the hearing closed and entertain a motion for this special permit SP-23-03 on Van Rensselaer Street. Is there a motion?
Move approval with a negative declaration granting the waivers.
Two tree waivers and sign waiver. We no longer need
any of the remaining waivers.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Special permit SP-23-03 is approved. We move to our next public hearing, please.
The next public hearing is PR-22-20, project site review for new construction to construct a 3-story, 6-unit apartment building on property situated at 1007 Madison Street. Corner of Walnut LLC is the owner, Jack Mamie is the applicant, and the property lies within a residential Class B zoning district.
Hi everyone, I'm Jack Mamie. My address is 200 East 72nd Street, apartment 14K, New York, New York 10021. Dave Mosher, who is the architect and usually presents with me, couldn't be here. He came down with something this morning and isn't feeling well, but he was nice enough to provide me with this. So yeah, I guess I'll just get into it. It's a 6-unit apartment building that we want to build. It's conforming in every way, aside for the number of parking spots required, which would be 6. We could only fit 4 on the site. The site previously had a smaller parking lot. We've, by removing the retaining wall that runs through the property, we are able to add more parking, and we're able to remove that retaining wall because we've added another retaining wall along the eastern property line to hold up the neighboring property, because there's kind of a very big grade change, and we thought adding that would help us flatten it out and make it a little better. So we're going from 7 units to 6 units and maintaining the 4 parking spots. I believe we're technically here for a parking waiver, right? Or is it also for the...
Technically, you're here for an overall project site review for the entire project. It does deviate from the parking requirements, so it necessitates a waiver from the parking requirements.
Thank you. I usually let Dave handle the technical stuff.
Questions for the applicant?
Yes, just a couple. The transportation planner, when he reviewed this, said that the parking lot requires buffers along the property line for plantings. And I apologize, but my version of the drawing is microscopic, so I can't tell if they're there. Have they been added, staff?
Jeff,
anybody who wants to answer that. I just can't read the drawing. It's too small. Even with a magnifying glass, I couldn't do it.
Sorry, yeah, Jeff could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we addressed that comment in between the time the hearing notice was issued and now. and I believe we did satisfy that.
Right there, maybe. I can't read it. It's a terrible drawing. I mean, there's a symbol that might be plant material, but even blown up, it's hard for me to tell.
You're referring to this area over here?
His comment is the parking lot requires buffers along the property line of no less than 3 feet measured inward for planting. So I'm guessing.
Yeah, we have the new lawn area all along.
And it goes all the way back to where the parking lot is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Up until where the curb cut is.
Yeah, okay. All right. And then his other was that the parking area had to be curbed or include concrete-filled bollards. And again, I couldn't tell from my drawing, so do you have those? Is there curbing around the parking, or do you have concrete wheel stops?
We have the curve right over here.
Yep.
And
does it continue into the property? I can't really tell from this.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it.
Maybe we could condition that if we had to.
My understanding with respect to that comment, there is a proposed fence along the outside of the driveway, if you will, as opposed to bollards or curbing to
prevent stray vehicle use. Okay.
Approaching.
All right.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, that was all I had. I was looking for that clarification. Thanks.
Anyone else with questions for the applicant?
All set, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there individuals who would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, please come forward, provide your name and address and comments. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application, please come forward to do so. Okay, we have no further speakers on this application. We'll close this public hearing and entertain a motion for action on the project site review on Madison Street, PR-22-20.
Move approval with a negative declaration granting the requested waiver.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? PR-22-20 is approved for the project site review at 1007 Madison Street. Our next and last public hearing, but it also is connected to a new business item that we have that, right? I would, and the applicant is here, I recommend we deal with both topics simultaneously, and we will then separate the two for action when the time comes for action.
The last public hearing is R2309, a re-subdivision to combine 3 properties situated at 905, 925 Irving Avenue, 100 Euclid Avenue, and 100 University Place into one new lot. Syracuse University is the owner and the applicant, and the properties lie within a planned institutional district. This is a companion application to a new business item, as you indicated, Z2214M3, which is a project plan review for new construction in order to construct a 26,000 square foot addition to the JMA Wireless Dome on property situated at 905, 925 Irving Avenue. The new construction to be known as the Myron Victory Court. Again, Syracuse University is the owner and the applicant, and the property lies within a planned institutional district. The applicant can present both proposals at one time, but you will need to act on each application separately.
Okay, we will do so.
And the re-subdivision is subject to public hearing. The project plan for new construction is a new business item.
Good evening, Chairman
evening.
Kulik and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Jennifer Bybee, Assistant Director for Campus Planning with Syracuse University. The office address is 1320 Jamesville Ave, And I have with me tonight Dave Warren, Associate Director with the Office of Campus Planning for Syracuse University, with the same office address at 1320 Jamesville Ave in Syracuse. Dave is also the project manager for the project. As Jeff's comments alluded to, there are a couple of components to this project, so what I'm going to do first is discuss the site and the building proposal itself, and then address the signage implications of it, then the re-subdivision aspect, and then finally touch upon the County Planning Board and the Landmark Preservation Board's reviews. And we'll note, maybe that's what Jeff's passing on, I'm not sure, there is a letter of support as well, which I'll mention at the very end. I'm going to just come right over to my site plan.
Thank you.
Okay. So just to orient you, this site plan is facing north. This is the JMA Dome to the west, and the Barnes Center at the Arch to the east. And a component of the Barnes Center at the Arch is the original Archbold building. This is the recreation center for the university, and at the northern portion of the building of the Barnes Center at the Arch is the health center aspect, student health care. And I think everyone knows what happens at the JMA Dome. So essentially, this project, the Myron Victory Court, which is outlined here in this bright orange color, is basically an infill project. What is happening right here on this land is it's simply just a paved interstitial area. Parking's not allowed. Students and faculty and ESF students as well walk through this area to get from one part of campus to another, or even from building to building. It's not a particularly glamorous part of campus. So essentially, with the gift from Mr. Myron, this will enclose that space, and it will allow for dome-related indoor activities to occur there. There are two slightly different versions of the MVC that we are asking for approval for. They're both 26,000 square feet. One of them has larger overhangs at the entry canopies. This is actually showing in red here, and this was submitted to you in January, submitted to the city in January. This shows reduced canopy overhangs. That only impacts the lot coverage. So in the more fulsome proposal, we have larger overhangs. In the less fulsome proposal, we'll call it the alternate reduced overhangs. Also, this is a, Myron Victory Court is basically atrium space, and with the more fulsome option, there's also a clerestory option, which provides a little more volume, but doesn't affect the square footage. So at this point, we're not quite sure whether we'll do the more fulsome one or the more pared back one. Probably budget will dictate that. But we would like to have, we might have approval for both, so that if we do the more pared down version, we're not necessarily coming back and running the whole gauntlet again. So those are the basic facts about the project. There's a tremendous amount of glass at both the north and the south entry. The idea is to add natural light to the space, and also with particular attention to the Archbold component of the Barnes Center, being quite careful to leave all of this original facade, well, original is originally having been rebuilt, that is, but leave that exposed, and we're touching the building as lightly as possible. So there are some signage implications with this project. And this is where we get into the modification to the JMA Dome signage approval that this board approved in October 2022. Two of the wall signs for JMA, the JMA Dome, actually physically cannot be built because of us building Myron Victory Court, because we're putting them exactly where the sign, let me actually, I have a better board for this, the southeast. Let me get my other board, sorry. Yeah, okay. I hope that stays. This was the location, one of the approved wall signs at the southeast corner. This was the location for one of the other wall signs that was approved at the northeast corner. where we're building Myron Victory Court means we physically can't build those. So the design solution and what we're proposing as part of the signage component of all this is to completely eliminate the wall sign for the dome at the southeast corner. It just completely goes away and won't be built. And then the sign that was approved at the northeast corner will move to the middle of the north elevation. There is some signage specific to Myron Victory Court, which is on the south elevation, this block S only, which is about 100 square feet, nothing else. And then on the north elevation, same size block S with some letters that indicate Myron Victory Court. And the net difference is we're proposing about 825 square feet less of signage with this project. Okay, re-subdivision. It's kind of hard to fit these two little ones. We'll see if they stay. Actually, I think they might. I think so. I'll just hold this one. All right, all of that, we put these together because we think they most clearly illustrate what's happening with the re-subdivision. The one that I'm holding shows, these are obviously all owned by Syracuse University, and right now there are 3 parcels. The parcel that's covered in orange is the dome parcel. And it just so happens that where the parcel line is exactly where we want to put Myron Victory Court. So we're proposing to re-subdivide and add the dome parcel, the orange one, make it into part of the green one. This is existing condition. This is showing proposed. Now, as part of kind of a cleanup effort while we're at this, you'll notice this parcel that's in purple. That's the women's building field immediately west of Comstock Ave. And quite honestly, right now there's a vestigial parcel line that's going through the women's building. So we have no plans for that area, and it's not necessarily part of this, but we thought while we were going through this process, and at some point we were going to want to clean that issue up, we thought we would just add it in with this re-subdivision so that then we will have one large parcel that contains all the university's holdings as bounded by the public streets, Comstock, Euclid, well, not College Place because we own that, and Irving over here, and then, of course, ESF and Oakwood Cemetery. So we're just capturing that purple one while we're doing it. We think it's efficient, and we, of course, discussed this with the zoning staff, and they liked that idea as well. All right. Gotta catch myself here. All right. Because the project location is across from SUNY ESF, then we had to have the County Planning Board review the project because of GML 239 being a certain distance from a public use. And they did review the project on February 1st. I'm going to quote what they said so I get it exactly right. The proposal will have no significant adverse inter-community or county-wide implications and may be acted on solely by the referring board. I had mentioned the original Archbold building. The north facade of that building is the only part of the original building that survived an awful fire many years ago. And for that reason, that north facade was noted in the National Register District nomination. This project does not touch that north facade, and we are barely touching Archbold and touching it as lightly as we can. But nonetheless, in consultation with city staff, it seemed appropriate that, because it is part of the National Register District, that we have the project reviewed by the Landmark Preservation Board, which they did on February 1st and, February 2nd and February 16th. They had some follow-up questions and clarifications, which we responded to, in particular, the actual construction methods with which we're touching the building, and we responded on that, basically expansion joints, and also wanting to know if the full-story windows of Archbold would be visible under all scenarios with the construction of Victory Court. And so that was from last Thursday. Our office and Populous Architects responded on that, made slight design changes, and we are ensuring that the windows will be fully visible from the interior space. And so I spoke with Kate today and delivered the drawings as well. And they had additional questions as well, which we also responded to. And I believe she gave all this information to Mr. Harrop. And so what she said was this additional information and clarifications satisfy the Syracuse Landmark Preservation Board's concerns. No further preservation review is required. And finally, as I alluded to at the beginning, we do have a letter of support from the Executive Operating Officer, Mark Lichtenstein, with ESF in support of the project. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant on either the re-subdivision application or the new business item?
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
Either one. Okay. All right. Thank you. Are there individuals who wish to speak in favor of the re-subdivision application? R-23-09. Comments in favor of the re-subdivision application? If not, is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to that same application for re-subdivision R-23-09? We have no additional speakers, so we will close the hearing for the re-subdivision. The new business item was a discussion item, so there's no hearing to close there. Is there a motion for action on the re-subdivision?
Move approval with a negative declaration.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? R-23-09 is approved. And for the new business item, which was project site review, not a public hearing, is there a motion for action on this?
Motion to approve with negative declaration.
Second.
That's a second. Further discussion on the motion?
I would just like to thank the applicant for responding in a positive way to the Preservation Board's comments regarding impacts to the quasi-historic facade of Archbold.
Comments or discussion?
Before you take did you already take a vote on the new business item?
Just out.
I would just point out that there's a main proposal with the backup, and so any motion to approve presumably includes the alternate plan as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
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 I just don't want there to be any assumptions or...
I think the applicant called it a pared down version and then a full version.
Correct.
Thank you, Jeff.
I assume that the applicant's priority is the paired up version, and the second priority is the pared down version, but as she indicated, probably to be determined by budget factors. So we have an understanding that either option is acceptable to the maker of the motion and the seconder. Okay, further discussion, further clarification?
Thank you, Jeff.
The discussion holds, then all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The project site review Z-2214M3 is approved. Thank you. We have additional
Yep, the next new business item is a minor modification, SP-03-38M1. a special permit modification for a care home in order to modify the site plan, floor plans, and elevations on property situated at 1003 Montgomery Street. Elio Health Incorporated is the owner. Kathleen Gaffney Babb is the applicant, and the property lies within a residential Class B zoning district. The scope of work includes masonry cleaning and repointing of the exterior brick, replacing the roof and roof access stair, constructing an ADA compliant bathroom and a janitor closet, providing new floor and wall finishes, installing additional asphalt and restriping the parking lot, constructing a new patio, installing perimeter fencing, and providing a new dumpster enclosure. The proposal does not necessitate any new or expanded waivers from the zoning rules and regulations.
And the capacity remains unchanged?
Correct.
Thank you. Questions on this?
Nope.
Special modification? If not, is there a motion for SP-0338M1?
Move approval of the negative declaration.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Special permit modification is approved. We have some discussion items before we move to our authorizations for the next public hearings.
The first discussion item is notice of intent to act as lead agency for a project put forth or being put forth by the Northside Genesee Associates LLC for demolition and new construction on properties situated at 1219 to 1221, 1225 to 1227, 1231, 1237, 1301, 1311, 1317, and 1323 East Genesee Street, 208, 210, 212 to 214, and 224 Ashworth Place, and 316 Pine Street. This is a similar project that the applicant applied for circa 2019. I'll let Brian Bouchard correct me on that date. The original project, this current proposal necessitates variance and review and approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals. It requires a project site review for these properties lie both in residential Class B and residential Class C zoning districts. So the residential Class B zoning districts will require a project site review for new construction. The residential Class C zoning districts will require a special permit for a multi-building / apartment. And again, there was a similar project back in 2019. The Board of Zoning Appeals denied the variance, so the applicant withdrew the project before it came before the City Planning Commission. They have revised the project since then and are here this evening to discuss the project with the Planning Commission and with the intent of the Planning Commission to act as lead agency going forward.
Thank you. So good evening, Brian Bouchard with CHA Project Engineer, and also with me is Chris Geiger, and also his development partner, Chris Brookshire with Northside Genesee Associates. Chris Brookshire couldn't be here this evening. So as Jeff mentioned, this is really an opportunity for the board to declare themselves lead agency so that planning staff can start the coordinated review process and sending out the notices. But with projects like this, that are a little larger than some of the smaller projects that you see, we wanted to take the opportunity to come and just informally present what the project is so that the commission can start to wrap their head around some of the project components and hopefully make it a little bit more productive than coming back to you with a very long, list of zoning nuances, as Jeff already got into with respect to what exists there, compared to what we are trying to develop within what we believe to be the confines of the Rezone Syracuse initiative that's, hopefully coming to fruition here very shortly. In reality, going through the approval process now, this building probably won't be built until, starting with the approval process and then getting under construction at a point when Rezone Syracuse is finalized in some form or fashion. So it's somewhat relatable to those new regulations. So Chris and his development partners are the owner and operator of 505 Walnut, which is directly across the street from this project site. They also currently own and operate various multifamily existing buildings that make up the current project site. The site that you're looking at is bounded by East Genesee Street on the bottom of the page, and essentially encompasses the middle of the block that surrounds East Genesee Street, Ashworth Place to the north, Pine Street to the east, and then we have Walnut to our west. So this is 13 existing parcels, so a companion piece that will be before you at future meetings would be a re-subdivision to combine those pieces. And as Jeff already touched upon, the existing site is currently split zone between residential Class B and residential Class C. So there's a lot of paperwork in terms of the different application and how this project needs to be applied for that we can certainly get into in more detail as we go further into the approval process here. But again, making sure that we're careful with understanding what the future zoning will look like both for this area and other areas to like our north, east, and west. The proposed project, I believe, may be one of the first that it's a residential apartment project that will be mixed income. This is an initiative, obviously, from the mayor to include not only under the new Rezone Syracuse regulations to be either mixed use or mixed income in order to qualify for some of the incentives within that zoning district. As it was stated before earlier in the meeting, it's not required to be mixed income or mixed use, but there are certain portions of the zoning requirements, the bulk regulations, that offer incentives to either be mixed income or mixed use. This project envisions being both, earmuffs for planning staff, but we are not allowed a commercial use because of our C or RB currently, which is what we're applying under. But you can see in the floor plans that there's an end cap space facing the Walgreens, which is on the Pine Street side, that we are providing blank shell space for amenities for our residents, but would be easily transitioned to a conforming use under the MX2 district. So the building as a whole, 5-story building with basement level parking. Just to give you the sort of data of the project, it's 286 units with a mix of studio 1 and 2 bedrooms. Again, mixed income, where we're going to be providing greater than the 10% that's required under the mixed use. So we're going to be 12% at 80% AMI for the affordable units, and then the rest would be market rate. The garage has 143 parking spaces in line with the requirements of multifamily under rezone, and you'll notice that there's sort of a service parking lot adjacent to our current amenity space on that end cap that would service 7 parking spaces for what we plan to be obviously a commercial use in the future, but that isn't part of the discussion under the existing zoning district. The building has been placed along the frontage of Genesee Street, and if you walked out there today, you would see that it's broken up along there with multiple buildings, which are currently multifamily buildings. Some of them are in fact vacant, but broken up with driveways that access those. So the purpose here is to create a consistent street frontage where we'd be taking away those curb cuts and positioning this building up along Genesee Street. I will point out, as you start to look at the site, there is a grade change between the street level at Genesee Street and Ashworth Place. Genesee Street actually sits about 10 to 12 feet higher than Ashworth Place. So what we've constructed is a compliant with the MX2 district 5-story apartment building. So when you're looking at it from Genesee Street, as you see in the renderings, it's a 5-story building with a basement parking level. When you go around the back of the building, Ashworth Place is where you would be driving in at grade to that parking level. So what you'll notice that we did on the floor plans, in order to maintain the requirement of 5-story maximum, you see the 5 stories with a basement subterranean parking garage on Genesee Street. When you're on Ashworth Place, we've stepped the building back in that location, so taken a portion of the top floor off, because the garage counts as a floor. We'd have the garage floor and then 4 stories of residential. So there's a step in the middle of the building, kind of working that parking garage into grade, but also conforming with that building height. And that additional step that we've made would be a rooftop terrace for amenity space for the residents. The main building entrance would be on the westerly side of the building facing Genesee Street, where pedestrians would walk in. There's a variety of amenity space that's labeled there in red on your floor plan. And what's a little bit different about this project too is what you look at in terms of the architecture with the rendering more particularly, but also the two-dimensional elevations, which aren't really represented too well in what I'm going to describe, is that we have broken the building up into essentially modules so that the building itself is not a long face that you see with something like Theory or the CODA project that we just reviewed. There's almost individual buildings that you see even though they're connected on the interior. And the space that's infilled in those broken areas along Genesee Street are part of our exterior courtyards that actually face Genesee Street. So this is a little bit more engaging in terms of breaking up the facade with architectural elements, but also physical massing to break up the longer face of the building that faces Genesee Street, and using that space to have pedestrian level amenity space within our building. We also expect to take advantage. You can notice that this frontage is a little bit different. Genesee Street is actually a 99-foot right-of-way, so it's fairly wide. We don't have a hill that comes up in front of us like some of the other projects that you talked about today. So there's a lot of opportunity to not only reconstruct the sidewalk and the public space, but there is space to create sidewalk connections to and from these amenity spaces that are kind of in the middle of the building, and plenty of room for streetscape, landscaping, etc. We've already talked with the fire department and met with planning staff a couple of times to kind of hash out the nuances of the zoning code. The fire department, and part of the reason why we've changed this project from the last go around, is to really bring the building as close to the street as possible for fire department access. This was something that we could have solved in a variety of ways, but some of which detract from the actual streetscape itself. 505 Walnut has sort of a very massive paved area out in front of it that accomplishes the needs for fire access, but bringing this building up to the street in line with what's required under the MX2 district also allows appropriate fire department access along the frontage of Genesee Street. That would be the primary approach zone for emergency vehicles. We've also met with the East Genesee Regent Association, and Dave has survived with us here for this long meeting today. I was going to just mention to you that we have met with them and describe to them what our project is in hopes that they would provide their feedback for the board, which I was going to infer upon, but I think maybe if he's here to talk about that, I could let him do that on his own. But one of the main things that we talked about was that this project is different from not only the ones that you've approved in the past, but the ones that you've discussed this evening, because it is essentially 3 blocks away from what you would expect of the central business district of East Genesee Street. The way that we've approached our parking, again, is in line with the MX2 district, but believe that it will not have the same impact in terms of taking up on-street parking for a business. Like, you're not going to park down here to visit one of the businesses, and likewise, we don't foresee residents parking out in front of Syracuse Stage just to walk down the street to either visit a resident or capture on-street parking and feed a meter all night. So there is a little bit different approach, I guess, to some of those things related to the on-street parking and parking waiver that we'll be requesting, even though our intent is to meet the MX2 district. Essentially, that's a summary. This isn't a neighborhood revitalization area where sort of that mixed income comes into play in terms of the need not only for housing, but appropriate housing and mixed income types. The benefits that we're modeling ourselves after under Rezone Syracuse do require either mixed use or mixed income, and this project will be both on purpose. So not only providing that a small end cap for a commercial space in the future, but also that mixed income component. So with that, really just a summary in hopes that you can move forward with the seeker process so that staff can start getting those in order. And then obviously this process will continue in the coming weeks and months, where we do need to visit the Board of Zoning Appeals and this commission again for various approvals related to the project. Any questions either on the project as a whole or operation-wise that Chris could answer, I'd be happy to do so.
All set, thank you.
Great.
Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have just two questions.
Please.
Could you just repeat for me your tenant mix, the number of beds?
Our application currently is, the tenant mix, not the income mix. So the tenant mix is, it's 286 units with a mix of studio 1s and 2s, so the bed count is 425, and it's about 50-50 with studio 1s and then 2s. There's no 3, 4, or 5 bedroom type units, because this is more mixed income with either market rate or affordable units. So.
Right, so I'm sorry, what's the breakdown between studios 1 and 2?
There's 140. There's a sheet in our floor plan, but there's 147 studio and 1 bed, and there's 139 2 beds. So it's almost 50-50 when you look at singles versus the doubles.
And do you own all the parcels that comprise the project scope?
The majority of them are owned by the applicant, with exception of 2 on Ashworth that are under contract, and then 1 on Pine Street, which is a land bank property that's also under contract.
Of the mix of units that are proposed, what would be the mix for the affordable units? Would they be the studios, the 1s, the 2s, some of each?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I have an answer for that. I don't know if Chris does. And this is part of our discussion on how this rule is applied, not only for the checks and balances of when the city comes back to us to prove that that ratio is still being met in the future, but I'm not sure that it would be like a handicap unit is a handicap unit. It's designated that because it has certain, accessible features. I'm not sure that this would be where it's picked out. I think if you are income qualified, you may have the right to choose an available 2-bed or 1-bed. I don't think there's going to be specific rooms that are designated for the affordable component, I guess, if that makes sense.
I'm going to be perfectly frank. I can't imagine who's going to live in a 453 square foot room, apartment, studio. That's really small. I'm just curious from a market perspective, but that's neither here nor there. That was personal curiosity. So, thank you.
Sure.
So to the question, is it fair to say you don't know at the moment?
I don't know what the mix of 2s and 1s would be that would be dedicated to an affordable, qualified person. I think they would have the right to choose whether they wanted a studio, a 1 or a 2.
Okay, I think your colleague may have answered.
I'll comment on that. Chris Geiger, 120 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York, 11701. So it's an ongoing discussion with SIDA on what's required, but I think Brian kind of summed it up as best we can right now. It really is based on what the income level is of the applicant. And Michael's, I wish my partner was here, but he's under the weather and he couldn't make it up from Charlotte. Michael's is the largest affordable, one of the largest private affordable developers in the entire country. As far as compliance goes, I can tell you that we know that SIDA, the plan is, at least our understanding is that they're going to obviously have to oversee this to make sure anybody's going to be complying. Whether that's going to be mandated of just, some sort of mix that's representative of the entire building, so as we mentioned, the singles and 1s represent half the building. I could honestly see that half of the affordable units, in this case, I believe it's going to be roughly 34, 35, if you're doing 12% of 281 units. I would say that if that was the case, probably some mix very representative of the unit mix of the building. So maybe it's 4 studios and 4 1s and then 8 2s, but we just don't know yet. And obviously, somebody might make 80% of the local AMI, which I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but if that's $60,000, let's just say, 80% of that times 30% is I think $1,000 or $1,200 a unit. So again, it really depends on what the applicant can afford. And in my experience, not that I've done a ton of affordable development, but just from following it, these units get snapped up really quickly, regardless of size, just to address your concern about being a smaller unit.
Yeah, it's small.
I understand.
I'm trying to think of where would I put my stuff? I mean, there's like a closet.
A self-storage facility.
Step over here.
You made a point of saying they get snapped up pretty quick, but obviously in different markets.
Sure.
So that may not be the case here, but thank you for your comments.
Yeah, and just to address that, absolutely, Syracuse might be different than Long Island, where I'm from.
So it's
absolutely.
not comparable.
Yeah. But I will say, being the first of this kind of building, a brand new building in the city, I can imagine demand is going to be there because you are going to have some amenities that aren't typical in, let's say, in a typical, affordable type project.
So I don't know how familiar you are with the area, but there is a brand new building that sits on Salina, Genesee, and Court, which is the Salt City Market, and that was a brand new building with similar characteristics as far as the affordable and the other amenities, just so you know. So you wouldn't be the first.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? This isn't a public hearing, but it's a kind of FYI session, which we appreciate, especially coming in well in advance of a formal application, so that if there are big issues or questions or comments, this is the time, or a time, it's not the only time, but a time to present those or raise those kind of early in the process than we might normally have a chance to do. So we appreciate this sort of informal exchange and bringing us up to date on what we will be seeing down the road a bit. But I don't mean to close off the conversation if there are other comments or questions while the two applicants are here.
Do you want to speak or no?
You've waited.
Sure you want to hear from me?
Well, you're here.
You've waited this long.
As Brian said, you've sort of suffered with all of us.
I don't know if he's had time to prepare, but so.
No, it's fine.
After you did.
David's great on his feet.
I just want to confirm that they did meet with the East Tennessee Region Association.
Good.
And unfortunately, there are only 2 members of the board present, which is not a quorum for EGRA. So at that meeting, EGRA couldn't take an action. All they could do is what you just did, is listen and ask questions and the rest of it. So they still need to review it, talk it over with their board, and then they can take action.
No one threw tomatoes and so forth. And
However, I will note that this particular developer, Chris Geiger, has done an excellent job on East Fayette Street in building housing on East Fayette in creative ways, incorporating first floor retail and commercial and active uses where there weren't any before. So those things, again, greatly appreciated. And obviously with the 505 on Walnut, we're able to successfully build a retail use. I think everybody admits is very successful, and I believe is in excess of 5 feet above the sidewalk.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Do you anticipate your organization taking a formal position on this once there's a quorum? And
It's not my organization, it's theirs. I work for them. It's the other way, certainly the other way.
But that organization that...
Do I expect to say something? Yes.
Okay.
I expect it to be somewhat similar, but as they pointed out, we're on the verge of what is going to be the zoning ordinance at the time.
Right.
Current zoning ordinance, or is it going to be the new zoning ordinance?
We're in that transition period.
Right. And yes, there was, it is, Brian said accurately that one of the board members expressed the fact they understood that this was much further away from the core of that business district in which we're trying to develop. So they understood that the parking impact of this was probably going to be muted relative to the rest of that district. So they understood that. So but I have to let them all discuss that and iron that out.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave, we're happy to come to the full meeting if necessary. Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Additional
I would
questions?
just point out to the commission that there's a action before you to whether or not you wish to declare lead agency. If you do, there should be a motion to that effect.
Agreed. And is there a motion? We can deal with that right now.
So moved.
Yes.
Thank you.
You guys need some
Second.
coffee or something?
Second. Discussion.
Was there a second?
Yeah, George.
A lot of them, I think.
Yeah. Discussion on the motion. We don't have any discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? We are on record as that's the only action item associated with this project, correct?
It was, so I thank you for the brief moment, and we'll be back in the future, and good luck with your next two with the rezone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So the next discussion item deals with rezone Syracuse. You received a update briefing last week. You're being asked this evening to accept the seeker finding statement that's enclosed in your packet, and Law will present that to you, and then after this discussion, if there's any discussion on considering a date for a public hearing for rezone.
So, with your consent, several months ago, probably a year or more ago, the Common Council acted as lead agency with respect to rezone. They took a thorough and very expansive look at the environmental impacts rezone would have. They issued both a DGEIS and an FEIS. All of that information was previously provided to this board. They adopted a declaration indicating that rezone would not have a significant negative impact on the community. Under the seeker regulations, this board, as an involved agency, needs to adopt the findings or issue their findings. Those were included in your packet this evening, and we're simply asking that you authorize that resolution making that finding.
So let's probably be appropriate to have a motion and a second, and then some discussion to see where. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second. Okay, into discussion. Everyone did get the copy of the finding statement. Any questions? Concerns, issues? In that case, those in favor of the resolution, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? The resolution carries. And public hearing date we need to address.
We're asking that you pick one.
What was that?
We're asking that you pick one. Pick a date to
yes.
hold a public hearing.
Indeed, that was the idea. What sort of public notice is required, I mean, time-wise, in terms of number of days or weeks or whatever? How far out do we need to be thinking?
I would recommend you give at least 10 days notice of the public hearing. I personally would recommend that you hold it not on a regular night, because I think you're going to have a lot of people attend who want to speak. So rather than hold up regular business, I would recommend you pick a non-meeting night, non-regular meeting night. So you hold a special meeting to hold this public hearing.
was anticipating that.
But given the 10 days, for example, even if Jeff went and did whatever magic he does tomorrow morning, we couldn't have it any sooner than 10 days from tomorrow.
Right.
Okay. So that would be like,
Or maybe like looking at the latter part of March.
if we want to give a lot of space, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to.
So our next meeting is the 13th.
13th.
Like
about the last week of March.
Like that Monday, if you want to stick with a Monday?
I was thinking the Tuesday.
I can, whatever y'all want to do.
28th, the Tuesday, just to be safe.
From my standpoint, either Monday or Tuesday looks fine. I'm making an assumption, and it may not be accurate, but I was assuming another evening meeting that opens it up for more people than daytime, but...
If you want to start it a little, I don't know what everyone's schedule is, but if you wanted to start at 5 or 5:30, it would probably get you out of here before morning.
That would be nice.
Let's say 28th at 5:30, is that good for everybody, or?
Tuesday the 28th.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, was that easy?
Don't say it.
We didn't need a survey.
Should have done this sooner.
Before you go that far,
The celebration.
Wait, is a building available, is a room available?
We'll find a room.
We'll find a room.
You'll find a room.
You guys find a date, we'll find a room.
The weather might be good.
I have no, if you want to do it on a Tuesday, the 28th, that's, I just wanted to make sure that the 27th was not a meeting date, which it isn't, but
No, it isn't.
No.
I got it entered in my calendar, but that's on me.
We're good.
Yeah, so good.
Great, so we're good.
5:30, location to be determined.
Yeah, we'll check that tomorrow, though, and then we'll get the notice out.
Now,
The
I just
availability
wanted
of this room.
just for process, because no one's out of town. So if you have a meeting on the 28th, are you okay with closing the public hearing at a regularly scheduled meeting? Because I assume you're going to hold it open that night, you're not going to take action on the 28th.
You
Does that make
can.
sense? I mean, you can,
It's the
but,
very next week.
Right, the 3rd, we meet on the 3rd, so it's reasonable.
Right.
okay.
You wanted to hold it
I
open.
mean,
you'd only need
I
one
guess I'm
more
asking,
meeting.
if you did hold it open, that seems to be okay, right? I mean,
Yeah.
28th to,
To April 3rd, so it's really only 1 week if we decided to do that.
Which is great.
Okay.
okay. Cool.
5:30?
5:30. So, is this a special circumstance in terms of the public hearing on the 28th, or do we hold to our 2-minute limit for comments?
It's suggested that we hold.
You can.
So that we don't go into the
You can expand it a
29th?
little bit, like, I mean, if you want to give everyone 5 minutes, because it is a big document, it is a big undertaking, but I would definitely set some limit.
Yeah, I agree.
I may have my next birthday here.
The 29th?
No, not till January, that's what I'm saying.
Oh.
If you don't set some time limit.
No, that's what I was thinking, given the complexity or maybe the voluminous nature of the material, 2 minutes might be a little on the thin side, so, but 5 minutes, I think, is reasonable, and what I think might happen is one theme gets picked up and gets repeated, and we'll encourage people to say their piece, but if the point has already been made, we could, or they could put it to rest or know that it's been heard.
And what we will do, I'll work with staff, we'll put a notice to anyone appearing that the time limit's 5 minutes. We'll put it right in the notice.
Good. And is it such that we would encourage a written statement as opposed to a spoken statement? They tend to be more concise.
We will put that in the notice as well.
Okay.
that
I mean,
people have the right
giving
to-
that option,
Yes.
I think it does help people focus a little better on the points they really want to make if they're putting it in writing. Okay, it sounds like we...
And I also think your point about when folks come to the podium, they could certainly say, 10 other people have already said ABC. I agree with that. I think it's important to emphasize that, and I want to add this one other thing. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed to all of that. Thank you.
And someone's bringing refreshments for that meeting? It'll be a long one, perhaps. Okay. So we have done all that we need to do around that issue for tonight. Okay. So our next item would be the authorizations for the 13th. It looks like we have 4 new ones, and we can keep it. We didn't hold anything tonight.
Yay. Don't be sad, be happy.
No. So motion to authorize the authorizations for March 13th. We have 4 applications.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Abstentions. Those are approved. And our last item of business, then, I think, is a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Favor? Aye.
Aye.